On behalf of Irma's family, I welcome you to this time of celebration. We celebrate the life of a woman that has lived a full life. We celebrate a woman that knew her time was short, but faced it without fear and on her own terms. She faced the end of her time with us without fear because she knew where her hope was and what her final reward would be. She knew these things because she had given her life to Christ 78 years ago when she joined this church on May 8th, 1938. She is a lady that will be missed and a lady that will be long remembered. Let us all join in prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for the privilege to have known Irma Dean. We thank you for how she has touched our lives. While we are sad because of her passing, it is only because she is not here with us, and we miss her. But we are joyful that she is by your side, and that all of her pain is gone, and that we will see her again when we come home to you. Help us today to remember all the good times that we have had with her, and may those memories become treasures in our hearts. Thank you, Lord, for your Spirit that supports us during our times of loss. In Jesus' most holy name we pray. Amen. At this time, the family, Rex, would like to come and say a few words.
I see the look of terror in your eyes. Oh no, it's Rex, and he's got a microphone. On behalf of Dad, Mindy, and her husband Ed, David, his wife Cindy, myself and my wife Linda, and the grandchildren, Nate Morrison, his wife Kat, right here, there they are, Drew Morrison, Paul, Duncan, Susan Duncan, Thomas Duncan, his fiancee Rushmi, who Mom is so happy that you're joining our family, and Kristen Duncan, and Robin Duncan Murphy, and her husband Eric. Where are we at? There we are. And in another month, or maybe just a few days, Dawson and Irma Dean's first grandchild, Violet May Murphy. Great grandchild. And did I introduce Eric? I failed to introduce Eric. My apologies, Eric. Robin's husband, Eric. And Robin is expecting any day now. First great-grandchild, Violet May Murphy. We thank you so much for attending this memorial of Mom's amazing life. You honor her memory deeply by being here today, and we don't ever want to take your love for her for granted. You were there for her on every step of her life's last journey, and whether you paid her a visit, sent a card, or food, or even a nice Facebook post on her very busy account, or even just offered up your own quiet prayer, you uplifted her and us, and we will be forever grateful to you. By the way, aren't you just a little bit curious about all the purple up here today? Well, it's actually periwinkle. And periwinkle was Mom's favorite color. So we thought it would be appropriate to try to capture that look today. I thought a short lesson in mathematics, which Mom and Dad would find ironic coming from me, might be helpful. But this math comes to us courtesy of Paul McCartney. It's from a short Beatles song called simply The End. The only words in the song are, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Mom was carried through her life and ultimately her illness and death by the love of all of us in this room. And I have every confidence that the sum and the power of our collective love lifted her up to stand in the presence of her God and her Christ on the morning of May 15th. It was our love that she took with her to that better place. But that love was born of her own love for us. A warm, energetic, embracing love that we all felt as friends and family of this remarkable woman. It was her love made for us and shared for us with us in times of happiness, in times of sorrow, and shared steadfastly throughout Mom's days. In other words, she took with her the love from us that she originally made and instilled in all of us. If you truly want to remember the Irma Duncan, whose memory we will cherish forever, love as she loved and share that love. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Mom was incredibly talented. By and large, whatever she tried, she mastered, whether it was bowling or golf or gardening or arrowhead hunting, certainly photography, ceramics, or quilting. She turned to her many interests with a passion. She learned it through and through, and with one exception, excelled. And it was that darn ukulele that she wanted so badly and tried so hard to master, and she was just lousy at it. Her willingness to grasp technology made her absolutely unique among her peers. Her Facebook account was busy and it was interesting. She sent her last text message to Mindy about 5 days before she died. To her, the computer became an extension of her mind, an unlimited resource of new information unlike anything she had known before. Sometimes her use of that information could lead to problems. I was going through some of her paperwork recently and I ran across the date June 4th, 2014. On that date, she had an appointment with a prominent oncologist at the renowned Simon Cancer Institute in St. Louis. It was at this visit that she received the devastating diagnosis that she did not have lymphoma, as she had been led to believe by Google, WebMD, and MayoClinic.org. Undaunted by the expert diagnosis of highly trained specialists, she continued to report to everyone who would listen that she had lymphoma. These symptoms were as clear as they could be in cyberspace. We told her a dozen times she didn't have lymphoma, but her beloved internet up and said otherwise, and that was that. To paraphrase a recent pop song, Mom may have had 99 problems, but lymphoma wasn't one. I take comfort in knowing that she truly is with her sister Betty and her mother and her dad in heaven. It's reassuring to know that she's being well rewarded for the life she lived among us. And in Mom's case, it's good to know that admission through the pearly gates didn't hinge solely on her ability to play her ukulele. She did so many things well, but that ukulele. We are immensely grateful to more people that could be recognized in one sitting, but I have to point out a few. Pastor Terry Brace and the historic family of faith here at the First Christian Church in Quoin have been wonderfully supportive. We can't say enough about the caring Celtic hospice team, including Mom's nurse, Tammy Tyler. Her caregiver, Michelle Pearl, who's with us today, I saw Michelle come in, was at her side helping, listening, sharing, and guiding. David and Linda Gross, your friendship has been such a powerful gift of your spirits to both Mom and Dad and to all of us. Sincere thanks also to the bereavement committee here at the First Christian Church. Some pretty important family vacation plans were changed to accommodate this service today. And we are profoundly grateful to you all. Our thanks go out to David, Linda, and Paul Serby and their team at the Serby Funeral Home, their friends and their neighbors, for their caring and compassionate guidance. And again, to each of you here, thank you for the gifts of your love, your friendship, and your constancy with her and with us. This has been a journey that couldn't have been made without you. We thank you.
Thank you, Rex. It is a testament to Irma Dean to see this crowd of witnesses to come and remember her and honor her. And I'm sure that every one of you has a unique story about Irma Dean and how she impacted your life. What better place to share that memory, that rich treasure, than with others who loved her as well. So right now we would like to give you the opportunity to share those stories. Keep them G-rated, please. To share those stories with those assembled. We have a wireless mic, we have a mic up front, and there is the pulpit. So who would like to share a story about Irma Dean? All right.
I'm going to go ahead and start real quick. Pastor Terry and I moved into the Quoin area from southern Indiana just over 2 years ago. It'll be 3 in November. And I guess we're going to move out friends so everybody can see me. Dawson and Irma Dean invited us to their house one evening. And she wanted to tell us what the church was all about. Wanted to let us know what happened throughout the years. Irma Dean didn't mince words. She told us straight up how things went. But she never had a bad or harsh word about anybody that she told us about. And that's the type of person for her.
Okay, who else? Surely someone else has a wonderful story about Irma Dean, other than her playing the ukulele.
Well, I will.
Okay,
I will.
You want to come on?
I will.
I'm David Duncan, proud to say I am Irma Dean's youngest son. And at some point we all realized as kids that whatever age our parents are, it didn't really matter with them. I'm relating the story about 15 years ago, when I think Mom was about 75. We were having one of our backyard wiffle ball games, and we were having a good time, throwing the ball, hitting the ball, catching the ball, just having a good time in a backyard family wiffle ball game. And Mom decided she wanted a bat. And Mom being 75, again, we realized once again afterwards that it didn't really matter. She took the first swing at the first pitch, and everybody's eyes kind of went like this because she nailed that wiffle ball. It wasn't just a little foul pitch, she nailed it. The second pitch, same thing. Third pitch, and on and on. And about that time, our daughter Susan was playing softball. And it may have been Little League, it was nothing very important. But I yelled to her, she was walking to the plate to bat. "Come on, Susan, bat like your grandma." People, what? I said, "You haven't seen her grandma bat." Susan just kind of looked at me, gave me a smile, a little nod of the head. And I don't remember what happened, but it's always been kind of a family story that Susan was going to bat like grandma. As a matter of fact, she was pretty good. But that's the story I will share. Please, by all means, come up and share some stories. We would absolutely love to hear these from you. Terry, it's all yours. Come, people. Tell us some stories.
Somebody.
I'll come.
Okay. We can bring a mic to you.
Thank you, Christine.
I'm kind of scary with the mic too because I can talk a while too, but I'll hold it down. I grew up, I'm Chris Kelly by the way, and I grew up on Washington Street, and we had the most wonderful neighborhood. I loved our neighborhood. Even now when I think back about how much fun we had in the summer, I can't believe how much fun we had. But we had all kind of mothers because every family that had a mother, well, they were all of our mothers. So if you were playing on the neighborhood, you might have had 5 mothers yelling at you. And we all had a whistle because at night when it was time to come in, the mother would blow the whistle. And each family knew their whistle. Now, we as kids didn't always hear the whistle, but the dogs always went home when it was time because they knew the whistle too. But I probably spent as much time at Mindy's house as I did at my house when we were growing up. I can remember when the Duncans first moved into the neighborhood, I walked down to their house, And I saw this big truck, and it had a big box in it. And I'm already thinking, boy, that box looks like that. It'd be fun to play with. And we started making houses out of it and stuff. But we had a great time. What I remember about Irma, though, is she was always joyful. She never was yelling at you. She always seemed to be very positive and very happy. I remember she had a green thumb. She could make anything grow. And I remember being up in her sunroom when her orchids were first in bloom. And it was like, this was a very special day because the orchids were in bloom. When my mother died, and well, no, it was before that. My father was in the hospital in St. Louis, and my mother was up there with him, and it was Thanksgiving. And we didn't really have a place to go on Thanksgiving, but all three of my sisters and I were invited over to Duncan's house, and we had Thanksgiving with our other family. I never saw Irma, and she was always Irma to me. I never saw her in any store, any place that I didn't see her. I got a hug, and I felt like I got a mother's hug. When I think of the Duncan family, I cannot think of Irma without thinking of Dawson, because to me they're like Mickey and Minnie. They go hand in hand. And they have been a wonderful asset to the whole town of Quoin, in my opinion, because they have raised three wonderful children who every time, if there's one virtue, one characteristic that I think of, it is joy. You can't meet Mindy, you can't meet Rex, you can't meet David without they give you a wonderful smile, and they're bubbling. It's a joy that they have. And I really do believe that if there's one characteristic that I would like to take with me, that I believe that Irma gave, it is the feeling of joy. So I thank you, God, for the gift.
Thank you. Anyone else? It's all right if they make us cry. It really is. Any other stories? Surely in this crowd we have stories. All right, there we go.
I'm Lou Parker, and my mom and dad were very close friends with Dawson Hermodine. And I don't know how far that goes back, but Dawson, I suspect, a long, long time. I've known them my whole life. In fact, we bought their home back in the early 60s and over on Division Street. And for the 50-some years that my mom and dad and my dad lived there, anytime anything went wrong, Dad would get after Herman and Dawson about selling him a home that had problems. But they were close friends, and they danced together, and at some point got into Indian artifact hunting. That's something my family had done as long as I can remember. But one story that is repeated over and over and over about an artifact hunting trip that I was not on. But my mom and dad and Irma, and I don't know if Dawson was on that trip or not, but they were surface hunting over by Pius Y in a plowed field like you do after a rain. And Irma plopped down on her rear end right up on a hilltop that no doubt was an Indian campground many moons before, and began to dig in the ground with her arrowhead stick. Now, that is not how you do it, and that never works. But she dug up the prettiest Indian arrowhead you've ever seen and became all of our heroes. So truly, Hermodine was good at everything that she did. So I wanted to share that.
Other stories? Okay, Mindy, you can go there, Mike.
I am just so touched that all of you are here. It just means so much. This is why I didn't want to talk. But when I was a little girl, sometimes people would come up to me, you know how they do, and they say, oh, what a pretty little girl. And when we'd walk away, my mom would always say, but it's the inner beauty that counts. Even when I got into high school, that was always the mantra. And so, you know, she was all, to me, whenever I would read Ephesians 4, you know, about be kind and compassionate to one another, that was always kind of the undercurrent for her. And, but one time when I was in high school, some of my friends were going to cut school. And so I said, okay, I'll go, but I had them take me by my house first. And so I went in outside and I said, Mom, they're wanting me to cut school. And I said, what do you think about that? And she said, well, Mindy, if you think your grades are good enough, then you go right ahead. It's your decision. And that always stuck with me, even, you know, on into, of course I had the kids take me back to school. And so, because I just didn't know how to do that, you know, cut school. But anyway, that always stayed with me, even as a teacher, you know, that it was important to let kids make their own decisions and then either enjoy the rewards or suffer the consequences of their decisions, that was a learning experience. And then I also wanted to share how, as she was in the last couple months, I mean, it was getting close, maybe the last month or so, she was meeting with the hospice regional person, because she was so adamant that they needed to be offering more tools in their pain management kit, not just the opioids that she knew she was addicted to at that point, and she always abhorred any kind of drugs or medication. She was not about that. But she was adamant that they needed to add that medical marijuana to hospice patients. But in order to get medical marijuana, they had to be with a doctor for over 6 months, and they had to go meet him, what was it, every 3 months after that, so he could establish a relationship. And then at that point, after 3 meetings with that doctor, then he could possibly prescribe it. She just thought this was such stupidity for hospice patients. They didn't have that long. And she knew that she didn't have that long, but she started the process, doing the paperwork and getting this started, and she made us promise that we would continue fighting for this after she was gone, so that other hospice patients could have that to help manage their pain. So she just to me oozed inner beauty.
Thank you. Anyone else?
There's a little bit of an add to that story that Mindy just told. I'm not going to tell the whole thing. First of all, I want to tell you that Irma Dean was my aunt because she married my Uncle Dawson. And not too long ago, she got really tickled because she had figured out, Mindy helped her, she figured out that she was my cousin too. So I went back, I live in Maryville now, and I went back and told my church that my aunt was so ill and I wanted prayers for her. And I said, she's my aunt, and she's my cousin. And my preacher just frowned. Not at all. I just let it go. You know, Irma Dean was a wonderful sister-in-law to my mother. And I just wanted you all to know that. You know that she just lived a half block from my mom. When my mom became bedfast, and Irma Dean would go up and sit and talk to her and bring flowers from her wonderful garden, and my mom thought that was so wonderful. Irma Dean treated her like a sister. But the marijuana thing, Bill Frank came down not long ago, and Irma was having a real bad day. She was in such pain, and the topic of marijuana came up, and we thought, well, we'll just find some. And Mindy, I don't know how to find her. I haven't grown up a long time. I was raised in the 40s, not the 60s. We thought we had a source, and Mindy Jane was going to bake some brownies that night. I chuckled all the way home until she called her son. He said, "You can't do that, Mom." I don't know if she ever got her brownies, but it sounded like fun.
My name is Mark Martin, friend of Rex's and Mindy and David and the family. I really don't have a specific story of Irma Dean, but I just wanted to express in generalities. Growing up with Rex through high school, primarily, we went to different grade schools, but high school and college and beyond, anytime we would go to the Duncan house, it didn't matter who was there, what was going on, just any time, Irma Dean had a smile on her face. And as Chris said, a hug, and her eyes would just lighten up, and she would be so happy to see you. And I think that, along with Dawson and how Irma Dean and Dawson raised their 3 kids, spending a lot of time, especially with Rex, and a good friend that he is, always has a sense of humor, smiles quite often. I don't see him get mad, or I should say I rarely see him get mad. I just think she instilled a lot on all 3 of them, and I wanted to share that with everyone. Thank you.
All right. Any other stories? Okay.
This is a fairly recent story. I'm Ed Morrison, married to Mindy. I'm Irma Dean's favorite son-in-law. The only son-in-law, but she told me always told me I was her favorite son-in-law. Anyway, last week at the Dawson Duncan household, there was a fire. And 3 fire trucks came, but we put it out before they came, but it could have been disastrous. And the fire trucks were out there, and they were getting everything settled to figure out what caused it. And Mindy's first response was, "Oh my God, Irma Dean is missing out." She went out and took pictures of the fire truck and put it on Facebook. Because if you knew Irma Dean, she had a scanner on all the time. And when Mindy and I, we had a short dating period. We dated like 3 months, and then we got married. But it lasted. Anyway, I remember at Easter time, this is Easter, first big dinner I'd had at their house, and we just finished, and then the fire truck goes by, and oh my God, you would have thought that the world was on fire. The house empties. Dawson and I looked at me. Dawson and I stayed, looked at me, and he said, "Happens all the time." She loved chasing those fire trucks. And if you see some of her pictures that were in the newspaper, a lot of them were fires. So think of Irma Dean next time you see a fire truck.
Anyone else? Okay, good one over here. I knew once we got started.
Mine might not be as funny. I'm Jerry Gross, and I'm their cousin, and Uncle Dawson and Aunt Dean. And all the Grosses, we had the best time when we were younger when we come down on vacations. Our friends had talked about going to Disney and Florida and all over, and we're going to do Quoin. And I want to tell you, they missed out because it was the most fun. Whenever we would go to the Grosses, it was always an experience. Whenever we go to Aunt Dean or Uncle Dawson's, it was always a good time. And it was just one of those things that you had to live through it. to experience it and remember it, because those were the best vacations ever. Probably about a week before she died, talked to her on the phone. And she was talking about these tulips that she'd mailed up to our house, bulbs, in memory of my mother. And I said, yeah, we planted them, they really look good. And just like Rex said, the technology got me. Can you text me a picture of those? We're talking a week before she passes away, she wanted to see the picture. And we sent it, she sent a nice note back. But that was Aunt Dee. We always enjoyed, and we wish the best on us.
Any more? No? Okay. As we move on, we'd like to ask David Gross, friend and other family, to come and share some thoughts about Irma Dean.
First of all, I'd like to thank you guys for asking me. It's been great hearing all of you guys. I read this to my bride before I came today. I cried, so if I cry later, bear with me. Years ago, I read a book titled Meetings with Remarkable Men by G.I. Gurdjieff. I wasn't too impressed with the book, but its title made me think a little about the idea of meeting remarkable individuals throughout our lifetimes. Around the same time, I read a Kurt Vonnegut novel, Cat's Cradle, in which he explains the concept of what he called Karass, which is a network or group of people that, unknown to them, are somehow affiliated or linked spiritually. Now, even though the book was fiction, I believe there's a lot of truth in that idea. I believe that we meet people in our lives that, even on the first meeting, we sense an immediate connection with. And I have come to believe that throughout the course of our lives, we all encounter remarkable individuals. The problem is that most of the time we fail to see them because we're caught up in the struggle to succeed at whatever we think success is. I think that Irma Dean was one of those remarkable individuals that I have been lucky enough to meet in my life. And that we both were members of the same Karass. Today, as family, friends, and church family, we gather to celebrate the life of Irma Dean and to remember and give thanks for the incredible amount of joy she brought to the hearts of anyone that had the pleasure to know her. Mindy was kind enough to share a few stories about her mother with me. And I think that one of them really demonstrates just how remarkable she was. Irma's grandson, Nathaniel Morrison, relates that once, when he was 4 years old and staying with his grandparents, he saw a boy behind the house in the alley getting beat up by some other boys. His grandmother ran out the back door into the alley, yelling at the bullies who ran away. Then she brought the boy into her house, cleaned his bloody forehead with a warm washcloth, and asked him who his assailants were. Then Irma and Nathaniel escorted the boy home to make sure the bullies weren't laying up for him and to tell his mother what had happened. Nathaniel says that it was pretty cool to watch it all. And that's just how she was. She didn't sit back and do nothing. She lived a life of true Christian action. She lived compassionately and stood by her convictions. She was pretty cool. She loved America, and she and Dawson flew their flag daily, even though sometimes she was not happy with the way our nation was heading. Once when she and Dawson and I were visiting, her hospice nurse stopped by. During the course of our small talk, the nurse mentioned that she and her husband were considering voting for Donald Trump. Irma Dean's face took on that quizzical expression she sometimes used when she wasn't real happy with things. By the time she had listed several issues that still hang over the head of a man, I think that maybe her nurse had started looking a little deeper into the candidate's qualifications. She stood by her convictions. When the city first hosted the Carcraft event, which sort of turned into sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and things got out of control, Irma Dean almost single-handedly started a movement to clean up and better regulate the activities, and she got results. Irma Dean's sister, Betty, married my Uncle June. Between that connection and being members of the same faith community, I suppose I've known Irma as far back as I can remember. When I was young, I worked at a clothing store on Main Street, and I can still say that two of my favorite customers back then were Irma Dean and Lucille Parker, who I found out later were great friends. As young couples, they hung out, went to big band dances, and hunted Indian artifacts together. Mindy shared the story of Dawson and Irma Dean's wedding, which throws a little light on a few more of the good friends that he and Irma shared. Irma Dean and Dawson were married in 1949 in this church. After 9 years of dating and Dawson's stint in the military during World War II. Their wedding party consisted of Dorothy Duncan Britton, Dawson's twin sister, Betty Davis Gross, Irma's sister, my dad's brother June Gross, and everybody's buddy Warren Britton. Dawson and Irma were blessed with friends. Perhaps because they were such extraordinary friends themselves. Their son Rex says she was passionate about her friends. She was an amazing friend to a tremendous number of people. And I'm honored to have been one of them. Rex calls his mother a 21st century Renaissance woman, and I have to agree. She was an accomplished photographer with over 900 photographs credited to her in both the Southern Illinois and the Quoin Evening Call. Once, when Ronald Reagan visited town, and Irma Dean was there to take his picture, she fell under the scrutiny of one of the Secret Service agents as she was reaching into her purse for another camera lens. She said she felt his eyes on her, so she removed it very slowly because the agent had placed his hand under his suit jacket in anticipation. One of her photographs, taken of President Truman when she was a young lady in 1948, is included in the archives of the Harry S. Truman Library. Irma Dean was not only a photographer, she was a master gardener and a master quilter. She was a highly sought-after bridge player and quite a golfer. I believe she shot a hole-in-one before Doss, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
She was a community activist and feminist before there was such a thing, and very seldom missed a Quoin City Council meeting, not necessarily to raise hell, but to just stay informed and to do what she felt all citizens are required to do. As Rex so aptly put it, she was fearless in that regard. I think people looked at her as a voice of reason, and I think they looked to her as a moral compass in Quoin. I know my mom did. Irma Dean was multifaceted and a very remarkable woman. Dawson said she was smart, far smarter than I ever was. And Dawson, I know exactly what you mean. And Mindy adds that she was fearlessly curious. She wasn't afraid to tackle anything that she was interested in. Just a little more time, she would have mastered that ukulele, I believe it. Dawson says his most favorite memories of her are the time she gave birth to her 3 children. And when it comes to family, Irma Dean truly excelled. Mindy says, I am forever indebted to my mom for all the love and care given to me throughout my life. She was there for me to lean on, but also to free me from leaning, to become independent in my thoughts and actions. She didn't hover over or crowd my brothers and me, but respected our interest. And to a degree, allowed us our mistakes, a valuable lesson in learning and problem solving. Mindy shared this little anecdote with me about her mother's parenting style, which she's already mentioned. In high school, several girls invited Mindy to skip class with it. She asked them to take her by her house, and she went to find her mother. When I told her what I was about to do, she said, Mindy, if you think your grades are good enough, you go ahead. It's your decision. I had the girls take me back to school. When I became a parent and teacher, I tried to give my boys and students the same kind of latitude within boundaries, to make their own decisions and reap the benefits of independence or suffer the consequences. Once again, pretty remarkable. And Mindy, your behavior was pretty remarkable too. Cindy Duncan, Irma's daughter-in-law, shares this. And this to me sums Irma Dean up. She always made me feel welcome and loved each time I walked in the door. She had a way of saying your name with delight when she saw you, and then came the hug. When I left, there was always an I love you and a kiss goodbye. She told me how reluctant she was to be a grandma, even though her friends told her how wonderful it was, but she didn't believe it. Until Paul David Duncan came along. She couldn't believe how much love she had for him, and as more Duncan Morrison grandkids were born, she loved each and every one of them in equal measure. She was my go-to person for anything plant or garden related, always ready with advice when asked. She was my other mom. And as people who know me well can confirm through the years, I have never complained, but have instead proclaimed that I hit the in-law lottery with Irma Dean and Dawson when I married into the Duncan clan. Irma Dean was one of the sweetest people I've ever known. I don't know if I ever heard her say anything bad about anyone. She could sense when I was bummed out and could always lift me up. She always had a smile and a kind word for everyone she met. And she was a wonderfully nurturing mother, as Mindy says. She's not afraid to get her hands dirty, literally and figuratively. Irma Dean was and is an excellent mother. No matter where I go or how far, she is home. Irma Dean's grandson, Drew Morrison, remembers. When we lived in Germany, Grandma and I always crammed into the back of our little van when we traveled in Europe, talking, playing games, and singing along to Garth Brooks' I've Got Friends in Low Places. Well, let me tell you, Drew, that your grandmother also has a friend in high places, and that she led a life truly worthy of him. I loved Irma Dean and count myself as very lucky to have been her friend. We are all lucky to have made her acquaintance along the way. And Dawson, you perhaps are the luckiest of all to have shared your lifetime with that truly remarkable lady. She will always be part of all of us. I'd like to close with one of my own poems that I feel touches on the essence of how Irma lived her life, especially the final line. Panther's Den, Indian paintbrush, shooting star, scattered along ridges. Like clockwork, they return each spring, oblivious to time that is not so kind to us. Trails cramp our legs. Our eyes fail as we scan treetops for dogs of yellow. But time is a gift unlike any other. Even a stream bounds over its edge, becomes a waterfall, rushing river, endless ocean. Everything is connected. Nothing stays the same. Pay attention.
Thank you, David. We now turn to the interactive portion of our service. We have a responsive reading in your bulletin. And how this is going to work is at the end of each sentence, your part is to read, "We remember you." So, in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember you. In the blowing of the wind into the chill of winter, we remember you. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember you. In the blueness of sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember you. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember you. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember you. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember you. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember you. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember you. You can't put a preacher in front of a crowd like this and not expect a message. We read in the New Testament book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18, "In everything give thanks, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus." Now, while such a verse probably at first seems inconsistent with this occasion, please allow me to challenge your thinking for a few moments, to focus on some things you can be thankful for, even on occasions of grieving. I know it's difficult to thank God when your heart is breaking, when one with whom you've shared so much in life is taken away. Yet there are some things, even in the agony and loss of death, for which we can be grateful. We can be grateful that we have the capacity to mourn. I know that sounds strange when you first hear it, but when we mourn, it means that we have lost someone worth mourning. Every day, people leave this life with no one to mourn them, perhaps through their own doing, or maybe because no one cared about them. You mourn today because you love this one who has passed, and because she was worth loving. It's not wrong to mourn. The students of the Bible know that God encourages mourning. The Scripture says that Abraham, who is called the friend of God, went to bury his wife Sarah and to cry and mourn for her. At the death of Moses, God set aside a period of time for the Israelites to express their sorrow. Jesus stood with Mary and Martha at the grave of his friend and their brother Lazarus and wept. Even in mourning, we can thank God that someone entered our lives and left such an emptiness that we sorrow over the loss. There's a false sophistication that says, if we let no one get close enough to hurt us, we will never have the heartbreak of loss. Loving makes us vulnerable, so we will never love. But never to love is never to live. It is merely to exist. To have loved even when you have lost the one you have loved is to have known life at its richest and deepest. Tennyson was right when he said, "It is better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all." Please be reminded in your mourning that you have something to be thankful for. During her time with you, Irma Dean got into your hearts in a special way and became worth your loving and your mourning. A second thing we can be thankful for in a time of mourning is that death, as nothing else, helps us realize what is ultimately valuable. We are easily confused about what is valuable in this life. We evaluate people by whom and what they know, where they live, what they drive, or what they wear. These things all have some value and signify a certain amount of accomplishment. In the long run, though, they fail to give us lasting contentment. A wise person will realize that the things that really matter most in life are the relationships he or she has with those around them. Many men and women have come to the end of life accomplished but friendless. They reach out but find that there is no one there who really cares. You, the friends and family of Irma Dean, have chosen to value the important thing, the relationship you had with this one you loved. Because you valued her, you elevated yourselves. A third thing we can be thankful for in the loss of death is that it makes us realize the limitations of time.